These are all the countries mentioned in the Bible, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. So the modern day nation of India is mentioned, and it's actually mentioned a few times even. Now just remember, the world was obviously a very different place, and a lot of these countries even had different names in general. And first of all, this is like before the discovery of like entire continents as well. We also have archaeological findings of trade between India and Mesopotamia, for example, ivory. The center here, of course, is the Middle East. This is the Holy Land after all. So just to zoom out from that point, you can see how they knew about surrounding land. Another mentioned quite a lot in the Bible is Ethiopia as well. Actually a very important African country to the book. And I bring this up because Ethiopia is in fact one of the oldest Christian nations in the world. It became Christian in the 4th century, and it is the second country to convert, just behind Armenia. A little bit less surprising, you got Turkey and Greece, also Italy and Spain, but Spain I think is just referred to as Iberia. You might as well throw Portugal, because when the Bible refers to Iberia/Hispania, they mean the whole peninsula, not just Spain. Jesus traveled to Bosnia-Herzegovina, and he spoke and commanded the Slavs to wear cloth adorned with 3 striped... Oh, Adidas. We are missing a country, the island of Cyprus, which, yeah, I mean, Cyprus is right next to all this stuff. Actually, mine says printed in Sweden. Throw Sweden on as well. The continent of Africa's north-south religious divide. We're just talking about this region being the focus point for the Bible, yet nowadays, obviously, a lot of North Africa is Islamic, and the country is almost cut in half between Muslims and Christians. It's part of the reason for the Sudan divide. Eritrea is still not a majority either one, though. The exact numbers of who's following what faith is kind of up for debate, but part of this has to do with their history. Ethiopia, like we talked about, is a very Christian nation, and they formerly controlled this land. Officially became independent back in 1993. Now, there's a couple outliers here in this region, not entirely Muslim countries. You got Togo, Ghana, Liberia. Is Nigeria now a majority Islamic? Yeah, just a little bit more than half is officially Muslim, but when you combine Protestant and Roman Catholic, they're about 45%. But one of the most interesting parts of this map is the island of Mauritius. They are the only Hindu country in Africa. And when I say in Africa, that's kind of up for debate. It's an island off the coast of Africa. Now, this island became a majority Hindu when Indians were brought over by the British and French, which you'll notice that's kind of been a theme with any place that has a significant Hindu population. Nigeria is split north and south, Kenya is split coast and inland, and then Burkina Faso is split. That's the problem with using modern day political borders. There's better ways to display it, because obviously humans don't always necessarily just follow the imaginary lines that we've drawn on maps. We're a little bit more complicated than just that. How many vacation days did you take last year? This is the European Union compared to the United States of America. Only 9% of EU citizens took anywhere between 0 to 5 days off. That is not very much. That versus more than a quarter of our people only taking 5 days or less. Some of them didn't even take any days off last year. That is freaking insane. Now, I do YouTube. I'm trying to think how many days off I have taken so far. I think the max I do is like 2 weeks. I think that's probably the most popular. Continuing down the list of EU residences, only 4% took 6 to 10 days off, 11% 11 to 15 days. So that's about the 2-week range. The vast majority of them are taking more than 2 weeks, 16 to 20 days, then 21 to 25 days. Finally, the biggest category, 30% of EU residences took more than 25 days. That is almost a full month off. That, as an American, I have to say, that does seem crazy. A whole month off? I don't know if I could do that. I guess that's what this chart is exactly highlighting. Like, that is shocking to us, because only 6% of Americans reported taking more than 25 days off. Wow. Only 7% took about over 3 weeks off. 17% is exactly the same as the EU, 16 to 20 days. Majority of Americans are only taking 6 to 10 days off. That's almost a quarter there. I do think that a lot of us have an unhealthy relationship with our work schedule. And what's even crazier about this is apparently America isn't even the country that works the most. Purely based off hours per year, you got places like Cambodia, Myanmar, Singapore, Mexico, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Costa Rica. I can't speak for all of Europe, but in the Netherlands, we get 20 days per year by law. Wow, that's pretty nice. I would guess that many of the people working in the US don't have 25 plus days of vacation to take at all. This is the average floor space in newly built homes. This is done with squared meters here. So if you've done any traveling at all between the US and Europe, you'll know we have very big living spaces. And honestly, part of it just comes down to we just have a lot more land to build on. That is one of the benefits to having a car-based infrastructure. Meanwhile, a lot of Europeans live in very small apartments. And obviously there's just a lot less room. So to see a nation like Australia come in right behind the US, not shocking. Australia has a very similar origin story to the US. They have a giant old continent to themselves. Then we get to the European countries. Denmark has a pretty nice size. It's not too far behind the other two. Then you got France, Spain, Ireland, and finally the UK, the smallest on this list at only 76 square meters. I used to live in a very tiny apartment. Yeah, that's about the same size as my old place. It's not terrible, but it's also not massive either. I mean, I've just seen a lot of horrific living spaces in, for example, Manhattan, New York. That stuff's just literally a closet with like a $3,000 a month price tag. Keep in mind, we are talking newly built homes here. tower. So I guess this is what they're currently constructing. The US is the 4th largest country in the world by area and 180th in population density. We have a lot of space. Yeah, that's a really important thing to note. Oof, notice how Canada isn't there. That's a good point. How do you build a house that's small? I'm pretty sure they are including some apartments. But again, the benefits to living in a very small living area is more than likely you do have access to public transit and just like an environment that's filled in all around you. Like you can buy a giant mansion in the middle of Alabama, but there's probably not going to be a whole lot to do. Countries without an Indo-European language as one of their official languages. Now, I'm not sure how accurate this is going to be because I don't think the US has an official language. Obviously, English is the most widely spoken, but we don't have like a state-designed official language. Regardless, there's only a couple places on Earth that qualify here. Keep in mind, Indo-European languages are quite widespread. I mean, the vast majority, obviously, of Europe speaks Indo-European languages, except, funny enough, Hungary. There's an interesting story behind that, but also a lot of land outside of Europe as well. Yes, the Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, they are not included. There's so much on here, though. A lot of languages that we don't often talk about, too. So we mentioned Hungary, but also Estonia, technically. Also Turkey, and then unsurprisingly, a lot of the Arabic world not included. They do not have an Indo-European language as an official language. Everyone in the Horn of Africa, and this is interesting because, I mean, a lot of the reason for this, part of it, and a big reason, is because Europe colonized so much of the world, including a lot of these places too, but they still don't have an Indo-European language as an official language. Same goes for the ASEAN nations, Southeast Asia, Indonesia. Dutch is not an official language in Indonesia, and there's really not that many people that speak Dutch here. Singapore, that's interesting. So Singapore must have English. And then completely unsurprisingly, the Korean Peninsula, Japan, and China, and Mongolia. Only 2 places in Central Asia without an Indo-European language, even though they were under control of the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire for a very long time there. Didn't Mali recently remove French as an official language? Okay, I guess they should have been on there. It still boggles my mind that Bengali and Portuguese share the same linguistic ancestor despite being 9,000 kilometers apart. Wait till you hear about these 2 places. The only reason why Finland wasn't included, because you saw previously Finn is not an Indo-European language, is Swedish is technically a part of their official languages. Also in Iraq, Kurdish is an official language, which is also Indo-European. Laughs in Estonian. That would have been pretty funny because technically, yeah, the US should be in red. But obviously, I'm speaking English here. There's approximately 793 US counties without a McDonald's. Speaking of religious symbols, it's more American than these 2 things, really. Now, the one state that hasn't been utterly dominated by McDonald's imperialism is Alaska, only sticking to, obviously, the more populated areas. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, our US state of Hawaii has almost had every single one of their major islands dominated by McDonald's. One of the only places like that out of the lower 48 states, Ohio has a McDonald's in every single county. A lot of places also in the Northeast do as well, but it's less impressive because they aren't as big as Ohio. There's also Maine here too. Arizona is almost the furthest west state with every single county having a McDonald's, but they do have one missing. What I find fascinating about this map is if you know US population density, you would think that the red would pretty much just kind of be here generally, but it's actually going down like all the flat states. I mean, these states have a pretty good amount of population, I mean, at least compared to the region I was talking about before. I mean, look at Wyoming. It's the state with the least population, only 500,000, but they still have plenty of McDonald's. Now, part of that might be the way that they define their counties. These are really big counties, at least just comparing that to other places like in California. California is the state with the most population, so obviously their counties are going to be drawn a lot smaller. And yeah, the states on the East Coast obviously have very, very small counties. But wow, like Kansas, really? You have a majority of counties without a McDonald's. Nebraska as well, it looks like. Then South Dakota, man, you only have like a handful of McDonald's in certain counties. So they probably have a good amount of McDonald's. They're just all only in these counties. A lot of it also might just be due to, you know, cities and how much of a state's population is just in one single city. Although 75% of Illinois' population just comes out of Chicago, yet their entire state is filled with McDonald's, with, you know, or counties with McDonald's at least. There's a lot to be said about this map. I bet most have a Subway though. They can wedge one of those into any gas station. And that's probably part of the reason why Subway has so many more locations than McDonald's. Well, actually, apparently that's not the case anymore. Subway's gone down. But yeah, in general, they're just a little bit easier to squeeze into small spaces. Although I've seen some pretty tiny McDonald's in my life too though. You can almost drive north to south through McDonald's counties. McDonald's, please, I don't want to ever have to enter a county without one of you. You gotta slap at least like one more McDonald's, like here, here, here. Like I need to be able to cross over if I want to drive from LA to New York safely with me being able to buy a Big Mac at any moment. As always, big thanks to my patrons. Month 2 in Drew's basement. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa.
DOOCHBAGGINS.
I can't
Cutter
sleep.
Pavlik.
Kansas was mentioned.
Amateur Archaeology.
aPhatNarwhal.
Carmel
Fredrik Tibblin.
InquisitorXarius.
KingBearHaze.
KirinoIsBestGirl.
LuxembourgLover. Mgmluthegoat.
Tyrol.
Tambre.
Mexican 760.
ZaneyBoi. Like your name here. Check that link to Patreon down below.